I woke up one morning and checked our savings account like I always did. It was supposed to have $175,000 in it. That morning it had $34. At first I thought it was a mistake, some kind of glitch in the system, but it wasn't. Every withdrawal was real. Every transfer had her name on it. My wife Victoria had been draining our account little by little for 3 months straight, and just like that, 12 years of marriage went up in smoke. No warning, no explanation. Just a cold email in my inbox. I think we need space. I've hired a lawyer, but that's not what broke me. What broke me was finding out who she left me for. One of my clients, a man who used to shake my hand at our dinner table. Victoria thought she'd taken everything, the money, the house. Even my reputation in Boston's elite circles. She filed for divorce expecting half of my future. But there was one thing she didn't know. I'm not just a husband. I'm a financial advisor who's seen this exact story play out 100 times, and I was always ready for my turn. Stick around, because what happened next left her stunned, humiliated, and completely alone. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your life, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because this, my friend, is just the beginning. My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Worcester, Massachusetts. I didn't grow up rich. My dad worked at a hardware store. My mom was a retired school teacher. I learned the value of money early, how fast it can disappear, and how hard it is to earn back. After college, I moved to Boston and started working at a small financial planning firm. I had no connections, no Ivy League degree, but I had grit. I stayed late, worked weekends, took every miserable client that no one else wanted. That's how I met her, Victoria. She wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make everyone stop talking. She came from a well-off family, went to art school, ran a small gallery in Beacon Hill. We met at a networking event. She introduced me to a few friends, then a few more. Suddenly, I was shaking hands with people I'd only read about in Boston. Magazine doctors, CEOs, judges, old money people who trusted me because they trusted her. I'll give her credit. She helped elevate my career. But in return, I gave her everything. Stability, a townhouse in Back Bay, weekend getaways in Nantucket. She didn't have to worry about bills or budgets. I handled it all. All she had to do was show up and smile. For a while it worked. We were the picture-perfect couple. Elegant, effortless, people envied us. But under all that shine, things started to rust. We stopped talking like we used to. She'd be gone for long lunches, art events, spa retreats. I figured it was just part of her world. My world was spreadsheets, client meetings, market volatility. I can't even remember the last time we really connected. I mean, really looked at each other without some polite mask on. I blamed myself for a long time. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. But the truth is, Victoria had changed. She stopped asking how my day was. Stopped texting back. She got more protective over her phone, more evasive with her schedule. One night, I brought it up gently. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're just tired, Rob. Maybe we should take a vacation," but we never did. Because while I was building our future, she was preparing her exit. Behind my back, one withdrawal at a time. The saddest part, I didn't see it coming. Even though I'd warned clients for years to always be prepared, to have safeguards, contingency plans. Turns out I'd been preparing for this day too. I just didn't know it yet. It started with a gut feeling. You know the kind I'm talking about. That cold, invisible hand gripping your chest in the middle of an ordinary day. I was reviewing client reports when something told me to check our savings. Just a routine glance, except it wasn't. Instead of 6 figures, I saw $34.17. I stared at the screen, refreshed it, logged out. Logged back in same number. I checked the transaction history. The last real balance was 3 months ago, $175, $200. Since then, it had been chipped away, slowly, methodically. 1,000 here, 5,000 there, different ATMs, wire transfers, a few boutique stores, all the way down to nothing. I didn't call her. I couldn't. I just sat there, heart pounding, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Then I opened my email. And there it was. Subject line, let's be adults about this. A short message, Robert. I think we need time apart. I've retained a lawyer. You'll hear from them soon. No apology, no explanation, just cold detachment. That night I sat in the dark going over the past 12 years like a film reel. Every laugh, every trip, every time I brushed off a red flag because I thought I was being paranoid, because I thought I owed her the benefit of the doubt. And then came the lawyer's letter. It was as smug as it was strategic. Victoria was filing for divorce, citing emotional abandonment. She wanted alimony, half of my assets, partial future earnings from clients she introduced. They even had the nerve to list some of those clients by name, as if she owned a piece of my career. That's when I finally snapped, because one of those names was Alan Foster, a man I'd hosted in my home, sat beside at charity auctions, trusted, respected. The same man Victoria had been sleeping with behind my back, a client I built financial plans for. While he was helping my wife plan her escape, I felt like a fool. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how carefully she had staged it. She didn't just leave me. She looted the ship before it sank. And I realized she wasn't planning to fight fair. She thought she'd already won. Victoria had calculated everything. Except one thing, she assumed that because I was calm, I was weak. That because I never raised my voice, I'd just roll over and let her take what she wanted. She forgot what I do for a living. I don't just manage money. I protect people from disasters. I forecast risk. I build fail-safes. I've seen clients lose everything in divorces, lawsuits, trust violations, and I promised myself a long time ago I would never be caught off guard like them. So while Victoria was plotting her exit, she never noticed what I'd been quietly doing for years. Now, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid anymore, because I knew something she didn't. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the part where I stopped playing nice. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. I just sat at the kitchen counter in the dark, nursing a glass of scotch, listening to the rain ticking against the window like a slow metronome. 12 years of marriage, and I'd never felt more alone, and yet strangely more alert than I had in years. My entire body was buzzing anger, betrayal, pain, disbelief. But beneath all that, something else stirred clarity. This wasn't the first time I'd seen someone get cleaned out in a divorce. I'd watched clients sob in my office after their spouses wiped out their retirement, their businesses, even their kids' college funds. And each time I gave them the same advice: you can't stop people from being cruel, but you can stop them from taking everything. Now it was my turn. I went to the filing cabinet in my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a slim, black binder, one I hadn't touched in over 5 years. It was labeled in all caps, Structure Layer 3, Holding Protection. Back when I was expanding my practice, a mentor warned me, the richer you get, the more someone will try to take it from you, especially someone who once loved you. I listened. I took that advice and built my firm with layers. On paper, I was the managing advisor. But the actual ownership held by a limited liability company, Callahan Strategies LLC, which itself was owned by a second LLC tied to a trust account under my mother's name. My mom's 81, still alive, sharp as ever, retired librarian. She signed off on the structure, but never asked questions. Just promise me this isn't for hiding shady money, she said once, half joking. I promised it wasn't. It was for exactly this moment. The next day I called Marla Dean, one of Boston's toughest family law attorneys. No nonsense, Harvard educated, looked like someone who ate tax loopholes for breakfast. I sent her everything. Every document, filing, ownership, breakdown, tax return. She called me back the next morning. Robert, this is airtight. I've seen guys try to pretend they protected themselves. You actually did it. You're one of maybe 10 men I've ever seen pull this off cleanly. She asked me what I wanted. I told her the truth. I don't want revenge. I want protection, and I want her to know she never really had control. Marla didn't hesitate. Then we don't go to war. We build a wall so tall, she can't even see over it. 2 weeks later, we walked into mediation. Victoria was already seated, wearing her usual smug beige blazer. Her lawyer, a guy named Chase Remington, of course, smirked at me like he was sizing up a wounded deer. They slid their proposal across the table like a checkmate. 50% of marital assets, full alimony for a minimum of 8 years, 20% of residual earnings from clients she introduced, a partial ownership claim in the firm itself. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. Marla simply smiled, opened her leather folder, and pulled out the blueprint. The LLC structure, the trust filing, the premarital asset logs, 10 years of tax returns, business filings, and notarized statements. This firm, she said, tapping the top page, was never marital property. It is owned by a holding structure that predates the marriage. My client has not taken income beyond a reasonable salary, and all distributions are traceable to the parent entity, not to him personally. Chase tried to argue, tried to waive the contribution of social capital argument, said Victoria helped connect him to clients. Marla didn't budge. Referrals are not equity. By that logic, a waitress who seats a guest at a restaurant would own part of the business. Let's not insult the court's intelligence. Then she pulled out one last folder, the forensic report, every withdrawal Victoria made from our joint account, every spa weekend, every five-star hotel with Alan Foster, every luxury boutique she swiped our money through while I stayed late building what we had. And suddenly the room got quiet. The only thing you could hear was the sound of her fantasy collapsing. Her eyes darted across the page, and for the first time I saw it. Panic. She looked at Chase. He whispered something. She shook her head, but it was too late. The truth was on the table now, and there was no walking it back. The first mediation session was just the beginning, after Marla laid out our defense. Actually, no, our fortress. Victoria and Chase did exactly what we expected. They stalled, they asked for continuances, claimed they needed time to evaluate the documents. But we both knew the truth. They were panicking behind closed doors, trying to find a crack in the wall, and realizing there weren't any. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I didn't make demands. Didn't send angry emails, didn't post vague quotes on social media. No, I did something far more dangerous. I waited, and I let the silence do what it does best, make them nervous. Over the next several weeks, the pressure mounted. Victoria's attorney tried a new tactic: guilt. He sent over a proposal with compassionate compromise written in the subject line. It suggested that while she acknowledged the firm's structure was technically protected, Victoria still deserved a symbolic percentage for her emotional investment over the years. They asked for a one-time $100,000 gesture of goodwill. In half of the remaining savings, Marla laughed. Actually laughed. He's asking for a severance package from a job she was never hired for, she said. We rejected it. Next came the reputation threats. They tried to imply through veiled language that if things weren't settled amicably, Victoria might feel compelled to speak to a journalist friend at Boston Monthly. Marla's reply was classic. Any attempt to slander my client's character with false or misleading statements will be met with a defamation suit backed by a discovery motion, including subpoenaed text messages, emails, financial records, and photos, which we will gladly make public. The threats stopped cold. Then came the begging. Victoria emailed me, directly breaking protocol. Rob, can we please meet? Not as exes, just as people. You know this isn't how I wanted it to go, I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer owed her access. You don't get to rob someone blind, insult their intelligence, and then ask for lunch. What she didn't know was that I'd already made a decision. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted her to see me walk away, not with bitterness, but with everything she tried to take still intact. So when the final mediation came, we let them speak first. Chase cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Our client is prepared to walk away without alimony or future claims in exchange for retaining the funds currently in her possession. In other words, she gets to keep the $175K she stole if I don't pursue her for anything else. Marla turned to me. I didn't hesitate. Accepted, but I want that agreement in writing that she waives all rights to present future and intellectual property tied to the firm. Chase nodded. It was done. No alimony, no business stake, no part of my client list, no brand leverage, no I made you who you are. Just a woman who thought she was the chess master and walked off the board with a pawn. A month later, she moved out of Boston. I boxed up the last of her things. Hairdryer, old scarves, unused candles, and had them shipped. No note, no return address. Marla called a few days later, chuckling. You know, I've handled over 300 divorces. I've seen the ugliest people come out swinging. But you were terrifying in how quiet you were. I thanked her. Told her it wasn't about being terrifying. It was about being prepared. Because when you know someone is coming for your future, you don't rage. You reinforce, you plan for the day. They betray you so that when they finally do, you don't break, you win. The court settlement was signed, stamped, and sealed. No media, no screaming match, just a cold transaction between two people who used to share a life. Victoria walked out of that courthouse like she still believed she had a role to play in Boston's elite circles. But the truth, her curtain had dropped, and the audience was already turning their backs. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Didn't brag, didn't throw a party or make a scene. But Boston talks, it started subtly. A client casually asking over lunch. Hey, I heard about you and Victoria. Sorry to hear it. Heard she was involved with Alan Foster. That true, I just nodded, didn't elaborate. That was all they needed because if there's one thing old money Boston hates more than scandal, it's embarrassment. Turns out several of my clients had also worked with Alan. Some sat on the same boards, some had daughters around Victoria's age. And when word got around that she had not only cheated, but tried to gut the firm they trusted with their money, she was blacklisted without a single official memo. Suddenly, she wasn't being tagged in foundation fundraisers. Her name disappeared from invitation lists. Her calls went unanswered. She tried to maintain appearances, tried hosting a wine night with some of her old crowd. Only two people showed up, both hoping for gossip. They left early. Even Alan Foster wasn't immune. One of his biggest corporate clients, who also happened to be mine, dropped him quietly after reassessing their partnerships. I didn't have to lift a finger. They took care of themselves. That was the real twist. Victoria thought she could weaponize social currency. But that world, it doesn't forgive disloyalty. Not when money's on the line. Meanwhile, I rebuilt, but not in the way most people expect. I didn't buy a new car or upgrade my wardrobe. I started going on long walks. Stopped checking my email past 6 p.m. I took a breath, my first real one in years. One afternoon, while sorting files in the office, I found a Post-it note stuck to the back of a drawer. It was written in Emily's handwriting, my assistant of 6 years. Don't forget who you are and don't let her rewrite that story. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Emily, she never asked for attention, never inserted herself into my business. But she always knew. When I looked tired, she brewed stronger coffee. When I looked broken, she quietly closed my door so no one could bother me. She didn't pity me. She respected me. One evening I asked if she wanted to get a drink, not as boss and assistant, but as two people who'd weathered something together. She smiled. I was wondering how long that would take. It wasn't love at first sight. It was love after clarity. We didn't rush, didn't post pictures or make declarations. We just built something honest. And after a year of healing and letting go, we got married. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, my mother officiating, and a sunset on the Cape. I didn't invite anyone from the old crowd. Not out of bitterness, but because I learned the value of real presence over reputation. As for Victoria, I heard she moved out to California, tried to start an image consultancy. It didn't take off. She sent one final email, subject line foreclosure. I never opened it. Some stories don't deserve sequels. Some people don't deserve access to your peace. I had already won, not because I destroyed her, but because I protected what mattered, because I walked away with my name intact. My firm stronger and my heart finally unburdened. It's been over 3 years since I watched Victoria walk out of that mediation room. I haven't seen her since. And truthfully, I don't need to. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, not through some dramatic transformation, but through small, quiet moments that no one else saw. Like the first time I woke up without checking the bank account. The first time I cooked dinner for someone who actually said thank you. Or the first time I laughed, really laughed, without second-guessing what came next. Emily and I bought a small home just outside Boston. It's nothing fancy, but it's real. We have a dog named Jasper who thinks he owns the backyard. We spend Saturdays reading instead of schmoozing. And sometimes when the wind's right, we take long walks by the harbor and say nothing at all because silence doesn't scare me anymore. It feels earned. I've had people ask me if I got revenge. Let me be clear, revenge doesn't always look like courtroom wins or public disgrace. Sometimes revenge is just living well, unapologetically unburdened, free from the weight of someone else's broken morals. Victoria didn't just lose access to my money, she lost access to my mind, my peace, my future. And that is priceless. Here's what I've learned. 1, love is not ownership. If someone treats your loyalty like leverage, you don't owe them grace, you owe yourself an exit. 2, protect your future even in peace. It doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you prepared. 3, never underestimate someone who says nothing. Silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. So if you're listening to this and you've been betrayed, not just cheated on, but undermined, dismissed, stolen from, know this, you are not weak for trusting, but you will be powerful when you finally stop explaining and start protecting. What did you think of this story? If you were in Robert's shoes, how would you have handled it? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you support Robert, vote #3. If you're not a fan, vote #9. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Chris, so you never miss a powerful new karma story every single day.